Question 1. The analysis reveals that a senior procurement officer at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group has a close personal relationship with the owner of a key supplier company. This relationship predates the officer's employment and involves significant financial interdependence. The officer is responsible for negotiating contracts and approving payments for this supplier. What is the most appropriate course of action for the procurement officer to ensure regulatory compliance and uphold ethical standards within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and financial interdependence to the head of compliance and the officer's direct supervisor, and request guidance on recusal from all matters involving the supplier. Option B. Continue to manage the supplier relationship as usual, ensuring all transactions are documented, as the personal relationship does not directly influence contractual terms. Option C. Resign from their position to avoid any potential conflict of interest, without disclosing the specific reason for resignation to the company. Option D. Inform the supplier that the personal relationship must be kept strictly confidential from Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to avoid any perceived impropriety. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and financial interdependence to the head of compliance and the officer's direct supervisor, and request guidance on recusal from all matters involving the supplier. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an employee of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks governing corporate conduct and financial reporting. The core challenge lies in balancing personal relationships with professional obligations and maintaining the integrity of financial disclosures. Careful judgment is required to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, which can have significant reputational and legal consequences for both the individual and the company. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal authority within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, which are often mandated by regulatory bodies overseeing publicly listed companies. By disclosing the relationship, the employee initiates a process where the company can assess the situation, implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from relevant decision-making processes, and ensure that all transactions and reporting are conducted with utmost integrity and in compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. This approach upholds the company's commitment to transparency and ethical business practices, safeguarding its reputation and avoiding potential regulatory breaches. An incorrect approach of proceeding without disclosure risks, violating internal company policies on conflicts of interest, and potentially breaching regulatory requirements related to disclosure and fair dealing. This could lead to accusations of insider trading, market manipulation, or other forms of financial misconduct, depending on the nature of the relationship and the information involved. Another incorrect approach of attempting to conceal the relationship or downplay its significance is ethically unsound and legally perilous. Such actions demonstrate a lack of integrity and a disregard for corporate governance standards. If discovered, this would likely result in severe disciplinary action, including termination, and could expose the employee and Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's code of conduct and ethics policies, as well as relevant regulatory obligations. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the professional should first identify the nature of the conflict. Then they should consult internal policies and seek guidance from their compliance department or legal counsel. Transparency and proactive disclosure are paramount. If a conflict exists, the professional should recuse themselves from any decision-making processes where their personal interest could influence their judgment. Documenting all communications and actions taken is also crucial for demonstrating due diligence and compliance. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that certain production workflows at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group could be streamlined to reduce operational downtime. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the company's commitment to regulatory compliance and responsible industrial practice? Option A. Rely on the anecdotal feedback from long-serving employees regarding the proposed changes to guide the implementation process. Option B. Immediately implement the proposed workflow changes based on the study's findings to achieve rapid efficiency gains. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed changes against all applicable Chinese environmental, safety, and quality regulations, and assess their potential impact on compliance before implementation. Option D. Prioritize the fastest implementation of workflow changes to demonstrate immediate progress, deferring detailed regulatory checks until after the changes are in place. The correct answer is B. Immediately implement the proposed workflow changes based on the study's findings to achieve rapid efficiency gains. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because implementing process optimization at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group requires balancing the pursuit of efficiency with adherence to established regulatory frameworks and ethical considerations. A hasty or poorly informed decision could lead to noncompliance, reputational damage, or operational disruptions. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven evaluation of proposed changes, ensuring that any modifications to existing processes at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group are thoroughly assessed for their impact on safety, environmental compliance, and product quality, all within the purview of relevant Chinese regulations governing industrial operations. This approach prioritizes due diligence and risk mitigation, aligning with the principles of responsible corporate governance and regulatory adherence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications would fail to meet the standards set by Chinese environmental protection laws and workplace safety regulations. This could lead to penalties, operational shutdowns, and harm to employees or the environment. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough impact assessment risks, overlooking critical compliance requirements, potentially resulting in significant legal and financial repercussions for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or internal opinions without rigorous validation would be unprofessional and could lead to suboptimal or even detrimental process changes, failing to uphold the company's commitment to operational excellence and regulatory integrity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to Citic Pacific Special Steel Group's operations. This involves identifying all relevant laws, standards, and guidelines. Subsequently, proposed process changes should be evaluated against these requirements, considering potential impacts on safety, environment, quality, and labor. A risk assessment should be conducted and mitigation strategies developed. Finally, decisions should be documented and implementation monitored to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 3. To address the challenge of potentially possessing material non-public information regarding a significant operational issue at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group that could impact its stock price, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for an employee? Option A. Immediately report the information to the company's compliance officer or legal department for assessment. Option B. Sell all personal holdings in Citic Pacific Special Steel Group shares to avoid potential losses. Option C. Discuss the information with close friends and family who are also investors in the company. Option D. Wait to see if the information is officially released by the company before taking any action. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the information to the company's compliance officer or legal department for assessment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group concerning the handling of potentially material, non-public information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to act on information that could impact investment decisions with the strict regulatory and ethical obligations to prevent insider trading and maintain market integrity. Misjudging the nature of the information or the appropriate course of action can lead to severe legal penalties, reputational damage for both the individual and Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, and erosion of investor confidence. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between general business insights and specific, price-sensitive information that is not yet in the public domain. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the information to the designated compliance officer or legal department within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. This aligns with the regulatory framework governing listed companies and financial markets, which mandates that individuals possessing material non-public information must not trade on it. By reporting, the employee initiates a formal process to assess the information's materiality and public availability, ensuring that any subsequent actions are compliant with securities laws and internal policies. This proactive step demonstrates adherence to ethical principles of fairness and transparency, safeguarding against potential insider trading violations, and upholding the company's commitment to regulatory compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately sell shares of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group based on the perceived negative implications of the information. This action constitutes insider trading if the information is indeed material and non-public, violating securities regulations that prohibit trading on such information. It bypasses the necessary assessment of the information's status and materiality, directly engaging in prohibited conduct. Another incorrect approach is to discuss the information with friends or family who might be investors. This constitutes tipping, which is also a violation of insider trading laws. Sharing material non-public information with others, even without direct personal trading, can lead to illegal trading by those individuals and holds the reporter liable for facilitating such activity. A third incorrect approach is to wait and see if the information becomes public before taking any action. This passive stance is insufficient. The obligation to refrain from trading and to report the information arises at the moment the employee becomes aware of it, regardless of whether it is subsequently disclosed. Delaying reporting or action can be interpreted as an intent to benefit from the information once it is publicly disseminated, or it can lead to missed opportunities to prevent potential regulatory breaches. Professional reasoning. Professionals in financial markets and publicly listed companies must adopt a robust decision-making framework when encountering potentially sensitive information. This framework should prioritize immediate reporting to the appropriate internal authority, compliance, or legal. This ensures that the information is evaluated by experts who understand the regulatory landscape and can determine its materiality and public status. The principle of when in doubt, report is paramount. Professionals should be trained to recognize the characteristics of material non-public information and understand the severe consequences of misuse. This proactive and transparent approach is essential for maintaining personal integrity, protecting the company, and upholding the fairness of the financial markets. Question 4. The review process indicates that during the recent hiring assessment for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, a significant number of candidates were shortlisted based on brief initial interviews and resume scans, with less emphasis placed on the subsequent technical evaluation stages. This approach was adopted to expedite the hiring timeline. Which of the following best reflects the most professionally sound approach to candidate assessment for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, considering the need for both efficiency and thoroughness? Option A. Implement a structured assessment process where all candidates undergo a comprehensive technical evaluation and behavioral interview, with hiring decisions made based on a holistic review of performance against predefined, objective criteria, even if it extends the timeline slightly. Option B. Focus on candidates who have prior experience in similar steel industry roles, as this reduces the need for extensive training and accelerates their integration into the team. Option C. Prioritize candidates who demonstrate strong communication skills and a confident demeanor during initial interactions, as these traits often correlate with future success in a demanding corporate environment. Option D. Delegate the final hiring decisions to the hiring managers after a preliminary screening, allowing them to use their intuition and experience to select the best fit for their teams. The correct answer is C. Prioritize candidates who demonstrate strong communication skills and a confident demeanor during initial interactions, as these traits often correlate with future success in a demanding corporate environment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct, particularly within the context of a hiring assessment for a company like Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. The pressure to identify suitable candidates quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise thoroughness. Careful judgment is required to balance efficiency with the integrity of the assessment process and the company's reputation. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented evaluation of each candidate's suitability against predefined criteria, ensuring fairness and transparency. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and fair employment practices, which are implicitly expected in any reputable hiring process, even if specific regulations for this particular exam are not explicitly detailed beyond the exam's own framework. The emphasis should be on objective assessment and evidence-based decision-making. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness, such as making hiring decisions based on initial impressions or limited information, fails to meet the professional standard of due diligence. This can lead to the selection of unsuitable candidates, potential discrimination claims, and damage to Citic Pacific Special Steel Group's employer brand. Another incorrect approach, which involves deviating from established assessment criteria without proper justification or documentation, undermines the credibility of the hiring process and can be perceived as arbitrary or biased. This violates principles of fairness and consistency. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly understanding the assessment objectives and the criteria for success. They should then systematically gather and evaluate evidence for each candidate, ensuring that all decisions are well documented and justifiable. When faced with time constraints, the focus should be on optimizing the existing process for efficiency without compromising its integrity, rather than abandoning established procedures. Seeking clarification or additional resources, if time is a genuine impediment, is a more professional course of action. Question 5. What factors determine the appropriate course of action for a Citic Pacific Special Steel Group employee who learns of a significant, non-public upcoming merger that could substantially impact the company's stock price, when they have a personal financial need that could be immediately addressed by trading on this information? Option A. The employee's understanding of the company's ethical guidelines and relevant securities regulations regarding insider trading. Option B. The employee's personal financial need and the potential for a quick profit. Option C. The employee's belief that the information is not yet widely known and will not be discovered. Option D. The employee's personal financial need and the perceived low risk of detection. The correct answer is D. The employee's personal financial need and the perceived low risk of detection. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group due to the inherent conflict between personal gain and corporate ethical standards, particularly concerning insider information. The pressure to act quickly and the potential for significant personal benefit can cloud judgment, making a robust ethical framework and adherence to regulatory guidelines paramount. Careful consideration is required to navigate the temptation and uphold professional integrity. The correct approach involves prioritizing the company's ethical guidelines and relevant regulations over personal financial opportunity. This means refraining from trading on the non-public information and instead reporting the situation through appropriate internal channels. This approach is ethically sound because it upholds the principle of fairness and prevents market manipulation. It aligns with the spirit and letter of regulations designed to ensure a level playing field for all investors and maintain market integrity. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of confidentiality and responsible use of privileged information, which are fundamental in corporate governance and employment contracts. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the trade, believing that the information is not yet widely disseminated or that the personal risk is low. This is ethically flawed as it constitutes insider trading, a serious violation of trust and regulatory law. Such an action directly undermines the principles of fair disclosure and equal access to information, which are cornerstones of financial market regulation. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with a close friend or family member who might then trade on it. This is also a breach of confidentiality and can lead to complicity in insider trading, exposing both the employee and their associate to severe legal and professional repercussions. The failure here lies in the dissemination of privileged information, even indirectly, which is prohibited. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the information. Is it material and non-public? If it is, the next step is to consult the company's code of conduct and relevant regulatory guidelines. If there is any doubt, the safest and most ethical course of action is to abstain from any action that could be construed as benefiting from the information, and to report it to the compliance department or legal counsel. This proactive and cautious approach ensures that personal interests do not override professional obligations and regulatory compliance. Question 6. System analysis indicates that a senior manager at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group has received confidential, non-public information regarding a significant technological breakthrough that could substantially impact the company's market valuation. The manager is considering how to best leverage this information for the company's benefit before it is officially announced. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and compliant course of action for the senior manager? Option A. Disregard the information, assuming it will be handled through official channels without direct intervention. Option B. Share the information with key sales and marketing teams to prepare for a swift market response upon announcement. Option C. Instruct subordinates to begin discreetly acquiring additional shares of the company's stock before the public announcement. Option D. Immediately consult with the company's compliance department and legal counsel to determine the appropriate disclosure and trading protocols. Correct answer is D. Immediately consult with the company's compliance department and legal counsel to determine the appropriate disclosure and trading protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between business objectives and regulatory compliance, particularly concerning information handling and potential insider trading risks within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. The need for swift decision-making in response to market-sensitive information requires a robust understanding of regulatory boundaries to prevent inadvertent breaches. Careful judgment is paramount to ensure that actions taken to benefit the company do not violate securities laws or ethical standards. The correct approach involves a structured process of internal consultation and adherence to established compliance protocols. This means immediately escalating the information to the designated compliance department or legal counsel within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. This ensures that any subsequent actions are reviewed against relevant regulations, such as those governing disclosure of material non-public information and insider trading. The regulatory justification lies in preventing market manipulation and ensuring fair and transparent trading practices, as mandated by securities regulations. This approach upholds the principle of acting with integrity and diligence, safeguarding both the company and its stakeholders from legal repercussions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves immediately acting on the information to secure a competitive advantage without prior consultation with compliance represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses the necessary checks and balances designed to prevent insider trading. The failure lies in the potential for such actions to be construed as trading on material non-public information, which is a direct violation of securities laws. Another incorrect approach, such as sharing the information broadly with other departments within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group before it is publicly disclosed, also constitutes a regulatory and ethical failure. This broad dissemination increases the risk of leaks and unauthorized trading, creating a wider circle of potential insider trading violations. It demonstrates a lack of control over sensitive information and a disregard for the confidentiality requirements. A further incorrect approach, which is to ignore the information and take no action, is also professionally unsound. While it avoids direct violation, it could be seen as a failure to act in the best interests of the company or to address a potential market anomaly that could impact the company's reputation or financial standing if it becomes public knowledge through other means. It represents a passive approach that could lead to missed opportunities or unforeseen consequences. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's internal compliance policies and procedures. When faced with potentially market-sensitive information, the first step should always be to identify the nature of the information and its potential impact. Subsequently, the information must be reported to the appropriate compliance or legal personnel. This ensures that the decision-making process is guided by regulatory expertise and ethical considerations, rather than solely by business expediency. Professionals should be trained to recognize red flags and to err on the side of caution by seeking guidance from compliance before taking any action that could affect trading or public disclosure. Question 7. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a position at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, while not selected, provided extensive personal and professional information during the interview stages. Following the decision not to proceed with this candidate, what is the most appropriate and compliant course of action regarding the collected candidate data? Option A. Archive the candidate's data in a less secure, accessible format for easy retrieval if the candidate reapplies in the future. Option B. Securely delete all candidate data immediately after the recruitment decision is finalized, unless legally required to retain it for a specific period. Option C. Share the candidate's data with other departments within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group for unrelated internal projects. Option D. Retain the candidate's data indefinitely in a central HR database for potential future opportunities, without further explicit consent. The correct answer is B. Securely delete all candidate data immediately after the recruitment decision is finalized, unless legally required to retain it for a specific period. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and individual privacy. The assessment process, by its nature, involves evaluating candidates, and the information gathered during this process is subject to specific handling requirements. The core tension lies in determining what information is permissible to retain and for what purpose, especially after a candidate has not been selected. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the data retention policies and privacy regulations applicable to Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. This means only retaining candidate information for the legally mandated or reasonably necessary period for recruitment purposes and securely disposing of it thereafter. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant, safeguarding candidate privacy and preventing potential misuse of personal data. It aligns with principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are cornerstones of modern data protection laws. An incorrect approach would be to retain candidate data indefinitely without a clear, justifiable purpose, or to share it with individuals or departments outside the recruitment process without explicit consent. Such actions could violate data protection laws, leading to legal penalties and reputational damage for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. Furthermore, retaining data beyond its useful life increases the risk of data breaches and unauthorized access, creating significant security vulnerabilities. Another incorrect approach would be to use the collected data for purposes unrelated to the recruitment process, such as marketing or background checks for unrelated roles, without the candidate's informed consent. This constitutes a breach of trust and a violation of data privacy principles. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves understanding the specific data protection laws and internal policies governing candidate data, assessing the necessity and proportionality of data retention, and ensuring secure data handling and disposal practices. When in doubt, seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments is crucial to ensure all actions are defensible and align with best practices. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of transactions within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group that, if not properly accounted for, could lead to a material misstatement in the company's financial statements. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the internal audit department? Option A. Immediately initiate a detailed investigation into the nature and potential impact of these transactions, documenting all findings and escalating to the audit committee. Option B. Inform the company's external auditors directly about the potential misstatement before conducting any internal review. Option C. Ignore the system's alert as it may be a false positive and focus on other audit priorities. Option D. Advise management to adjust the current period's financial statements to reflect the potential misstatement without further investigation. Correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a detailed investigation into the nature and potential impact of these transactions, documenting all findings and escalating to the audit committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, as a publicly listed entity, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight concerning its financial reporting and disclosures. Monitoring systems' demonstration of potential misstatement requires immediate and careful judgment to ensure compliance with relevant accounting standards and securities regulations. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the materiality of the identified issue and determining the appropriate course of action without compromising the integrity of financial statements or misleading stakeholders. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation by the internal audit team, followed by consultation with the audit committee and external auditors. This process ensures that the potential misstatement is evaluated objectively against established accounting principles and materiality thresholds. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing listed companies in the relevant jurisdiction, assuming China for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, which would align with PRC accounting standards and securities laws. Mandate timely and accurate financial reporting. The internal audit team's responsibility is to identify and report potential issues, and the subsequent steps of escalation and independent verification by the audit committee and external auditors are critical for ensuring compliance and maintaining investor confidence. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and regulatory adherence. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the monitoring system's findings without proper investigation, citing the potential for minor impact. This fails to acknowledge the regulatory obligation to investigate all potential misstatements, regardless of perceived materiality at an initial stage. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to correct the potential misstatement internally without involving the audit committee or external auditors. This bypasses crucial oversight mechanisms designed to ensure the accuracy and fairness of financial reporting, and could be seen as an attempt to conceal or improperly manage the issue, violating principles of transparency and accountability. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately disclose the potential misstatement to the public without a thorough internal investigation and assessment by independent auditors. This could lead to undue market speculation and panic, and it fails to adhere to the established procedures for addressing financial reporting issues, which typically involve internal review and verification before external communication. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance, ethical conduct, and stakeholder interests. This framework involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting all identified issues. 2. Conducting a prompt and thorough investigation to understand the nature and potential impact of the issue. 3. Escalating findings to appropriate oversight bodies, e.g., Audit Committee. 4. Collaborating with independent auditors for objective assessment. 5. Adhering to established disclosure protocols based on materiality and regulatory requirements. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal that a batch of high-strength alloy steel produced by Citic Pacific Special Steel Group for a critical infrastructure project exhibits a minor deviation in its chemical composition, falling just outside the specified tolerance range. The deviation does not immediately present a safety risk for the intended application, but could potentially impact long-term performance under extreme stress. The production line is currently operating at full capacity to meet urgent delivery deadlines. What is the most appropriate course of action for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group? Option A. Discard the affected batch and restart production without investigating the cause of the deviation to avoid further delays. Option B. Proceed with the production and shipment of the affected batch, documenting the deviation and advising the client to monitor performance closely. Option C. Expedite the production of a replacement batch while continuing to process the current batch, intending to blend them to achieve the target composition. Option D. Immediately halt production of the affected batch. Initiate a detailed root cause analysis to identify the source of the deviation and implement corrective actions before resuming production. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt production of the affected batch. Initiate a detailed root cause analysis to identify the source of the deviation and implement corrective actions before resuming production. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group due to the potential conflict between immediate production demands and the imperative to maintain product integrity and regulatory compliance. The discovery of a deviation in a critical steel alloy composition requires careful judgment to balance operational efficiency with safety and quality standards. The core of the challenge lies in determining the appropriate response without compromising the company's reputation or violating any applicable regulations. The correct approach involves immediately halting production of the affected batch, conducting a thorough root cause analysis to understand the deviation, and then implementing corrective actions before resuming production. This aligns with the principles of good manufacturing practice and the implied regulatory framework governing the production of industrial materials, which prioritizes product quality and safety. Specifically, such a process would be guided by internal quality management systems, e.g., ISO 9001 principles, which are globally recognized and likely adopted by a company of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group stature, and any specific national or industry standards for steel production. The emphasis is on proactive problem-solving and preventing recurrence, thereby safeguarding customer trust and avoiding potential liability. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with production and shipment of the affected batch, perhaps with a minor adjustment or a note of the deviation. This fails to address the root cause of the problem and risks supplying a product that does not meet specifications, potentially leading to downstream failures, safety hazards, and significant reputational damage. Ethically, it represents a breach of trust with customers and stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to simply discard the batch without investigating the cause. While it avoids shipping a non-conforming product, it misses a crucial opportunity for process improvement and learning, which is essential for long-term quality assurance and operational excellence. This approach is inefficient and does not contribute to preventing future occurrences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based approach. This involves 1. Immediate containment of the issue, halting production. 2. Thorough investigation to identify the root cause. 3. Development and implementation of effective corrective and preventive actions. And 4. Verification of the effectiveness of these actions before resuming normal operations. This structured process ensures that decisions are not reactive but are informed by data and aimed at sustainable quality improvement. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a new internal compliance policy has been introduced at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, requiring significant changes to existing operational procedures. An employee is tasked with integrating these changes. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible and compliant approach to this task? Option A. Proceed with implementing the changes based on a general understanding of the policy, assuming current operational practices will largely suffice and seeking clarification only if significant operational disruptions occur. Option B. Conduct a detailed review of the new policy, identify any ambiguities or areas requiring specific interpretation, and proactively consult with the Citic Pacific Special Steel Group's compliance department or legal counsel to ensure a correct and thorough implementation. Option C. Prioritize the speed of integration to meet operational targets, implementing the policy in a manner that causes the least disruption, even if it means making assumptions about certain requirements. Option D. Delegate the responsibility of understanding and implementing the new policy to junior staff, focusing personal efforts on other performance metrics. The correct answer is A. Proceed with implementing the changes based on a general understanding of the policy, assuming current operational practices will largely suffice and seeking clarification only if significant operational disruptions occur. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group concerning the implementation of a new internal compliance policy. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient operational integration with the strict adherence to newly introduced regulatory guidelines. Misinterpretation or selective application of the policy can lead to significant compliance breaches, reputational damage, and potential legal repercussions for both the individual and the company. The pressure to meet performance targets while ensuring full compliance necessitates careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the policy's intent and scope. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive review of the new internal compliance policy, seeking clarification from the designated compliance department or legal counsel at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group for any ambiguities. This ensures that the implementation strategy is fully aligned with the policy's requirements and the underlying regulatory framework. This approach demonstrates professional diligence and a commitment to ethical conduct by prioritizing compliance over expediency. It directly addresses the regulatory mandate by ensuring that all actions taken are in accordance with the established rules and guidelines, thereby mitigating risks and upholding the integrity of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group's operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the policy based solely on a superficial understanding or assuming existing practices are compliant without verification represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks overlooking specific new requirements or misinterpreting existing ones, leading to noncompliance. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize operational efficiency or perceived ease of implementation over the detailed requirements of the policy, potentially leading to shortcuts that violate the spirit or letter of the regulations. Furthermore, delaying or avoiding seeking clarification on ambiguous aspects of the policy, hoping they will not be scrutinized, is a failure to exercise due diligence and can result in unintentional breaches. These approaches demonstrate a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for the compliance obligations of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group should adopt a systematic approach to policy implementation. This involves 1. Thoroughly reading and understanding the new policy and any associated regulatory guidance. 2. Identifying areas of potential ambiguity or conflict with existing processes. 3. Proactively engaging with the compliance department or legal counsel for clarification and guidance. 4. Developing an implementation plan that explicitly addresses all policy requirements. 5. Documenting all steps taken and decisions made during the implementation process. This structured approach ensures that compliance is embedded in operational practices and minimizes the risk of regulatory violations. Question 11. The assessment process reveals that you are assigned to evaluate a candidate for a position at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, and you discover this candidate is a close personal friend. You are confident in your ability to remain objective, but you recognize the potential for perceived bias. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the assessment, confident in your ability to remain impartial and provide a fair evaluation without disclosing the relationship. Option B. Immediately disclose your personal relationship with the candidate to your supervisor or the designated HR representative at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group and request guidance on how to proceed. Option C. Decline to participate in the assessment altogether without informing anyone of the reason. Hoping to avoid any potential conflict. Option D. Discreetly favor the friend during the assessment to ensure they receive a positive outcome, believing it is a minor ethical compromise for a personal connection. Correct answer is A. Proceed with the assessment, confident in your ability to remain impartial and provide a fair evaluation without disclosing the relationship. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a personal relationship and the obligation to maintain objectivity and fairness in a hiring process. The assessment process for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group requires candidates to demonstrate not only technical competence, but also ethical integrity. The pressure to favor a friend, even subtly, can compromise the integrity of the hiring decision, potentially leading to the selection of a less qualified candidate and undermining the company's commitment to meritocracy. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without violating ethical principles or company policy. The correct approach involves maintaining strict impartiality and reporting the personal relationship to the appropriate authority within Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and transparency. By disclosing the relationship, the candidate allows the company to implement measures to ensure fairness, such as assigning the assessment to another evaluator or conducting a review of the candidate's evaluation. This upholds the principles of integrity and accountability expected in professional hiring processes. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the assessment without disclosing the relationship, even with the intention of being fair. This creates a conflict of interest, as the evaluator's judgment could be unconsciously influenced by their personal connection. This violates the ethical duty of impartiality and could lead to a biased assessment, potentially harming the company by not selecting the best candidate. Another incorrect approach is to subtly favor the friend during the assessment, believing it is a harmless act of kindness. This is a direct breach of ethical conduct and professional responsibility. It undermines the fairness of the hiring process and can lead to legal or reputational damage for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group if discovered. Such actions are inconsistent with the high standards of integrity expected of employees. A further incorrect approach would be to avoid the assessment altogether due to the personal relationship, without informing the relevant parties. While seemingly avoiding a conflict, this can also be problematic. It may be interpreted as an unwillingness to fulfill professional duties, or could lead to delays in the hiring process. The more ethical and professional response is to proactively manage the conflict through disclosure. The professional reasoning framework for similar situations involves 1. Identifying potential conflicts of interest. 2. Understanding relevant company policies and ethical guidelines. 3. Proactively disclosing any perceived or actual conflicts to the appropriate supervisor or HR department. 4. Cooperating with any measures implemented to mitigate the conflict. 5. prioritizing objectivity and fairness in all professional dealings. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that Citic Pacific Special Steel Group is facing significant pressure to reduce production costs by 15% in the next fiscal year. The operations department has proposed streamlining quality control checks on certain high-volume steel products, citing historical data that suggests a low incidence of defects. Which of the following approaches best balances the cost reduction imperative with the company's obligations for product quality and safety? Option A. Implement the proposed streamlining of quality control checks, relying on historical data to justify the reduced oversight for high-volume products, and reallocate the saved resources to other cost-saving initiatives. Option B. Delegate the decision on streamlining quality control checks entirely to the operations team, trusting their judgment based on their direct experience with the production process. Option C. Conduct a thorough, forward-looking risk assessment that quantifies the potential impact of reduced quality control on product performance, safety, and regulatory compliance, and develop targeted mitigation strategies that may involve process adjustments or selective enhanced testing, even if it partially offsets cost savings. Option D. Defer any changes to quality control processes until the cost reduction target is met through other means, and then revisit the quality control procedures to identify potential efficiencies. The correct answer is A. Implement the proposed streamlining of quality control checks, relying on historical data to justify the reduced oversight for high-volume products, and reallocate the saved resources to other cost-saving initiatives. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to balance the need for operational efficiency and cost reduction with its fundamental ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure product quality and safety. The pressure to meet aggressive cost targets can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to shortcuts that compromise established risk assessment protocols. Careful judgment is required to ensure that risk mitigation strategies are not merely procedural, but are robust and effectively implemented, especially when dealing with critical materials in industrial applications. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive risk assessment that integrates potential quality deviations with their impact on safety and regulatory compliance. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible manufacturing, which mandate that companies like Citic Pacific Special Steel Group prioritize safety and quality above short-term cost savings. Specifically, it adheres to the implied regulatory framework for industrial manufacturing that expects due diligence in identifying, evaluating, and mitigating risks associated with product defects. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to stakeholder trust and long-term sustainability, preventing potential catastrophic failures, reputational damage, and significant financial penalties that could arise from non-compliance or product-related incidents. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without adequately assessing the associated quality and safety risks is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential downstream consequences of compromised product integrity. Such an approach violates the ethical duty of care owed to customers and the public, and it likely contravenes regulatory expectations for product safety and quality assurance in the steel industry. Another incorrect approach, which relies on historical data without considering evolving production processes or new material specifications, is also flawed. This overlooks the dynamic nature of manufacturing and the potential for unforeseen risks to emerge, failing to meet the standard of ongoing vigilance expected in risk management. Finally, an approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to operational teams without senior management oversight or independent review risks creating blind spots and a lack of accountability, potentially leading to a superficial assessment that does not adequately address the systemic nature of risk. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the company's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. This involves establishing a robust risk management framework that mandates regular, independent reviews of risk assessments, particularly when significant operational changes or cost pressures are present. The process should encourage open communication about potential risks, ensuring that all levels of the organization are empowered to raise concerns without fear of reprisal. Ultimately, decisions must be grounded in a thorough understanding of potential impacts, prioritizing safety and compliance, and ensuring that any cost-saving measures do not compromise the integrity and reliability of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group's products. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of deviations from standard operating procedures in a key production unit at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, potentially impacting product quality and environmental compliance. Which of the following actions should the management team prioritize? Option A. Conduct a brief, informal discussion with the unit supervisors to ensure they are aware of the monitoring system's findings. Option B. Immediately implement disciplinary measures against the supervisors of the affected production unit based on the system's alert. Option C. Defer any action until a more significant operational failure occurs to confirm the severity of the issue. Option D. Initiate a formal, documented investigation into the deviations, involving relevant personnel and a review of applicable regulations and internal policies. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal, documented investigation into the deviations, involving relevant personnel and a review of applicable regulations and internal policies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to balance operational efficiency with regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The monitoring system's findings present a potential risk that could have significant implications for the company's reputation, financial standing, and legal standing if not handled appropriately. Careful judgment is required to determine the most effective and compliant course of action. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation that adheres strictly to internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. This approach is best professional practice because it ensures that any potential noncompliance is identified, understood, and addressed systematically. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency and accountability, which are fundamental ethical principles and often mandated by regulatory bodies overseeing industrial operations. By initiating a formal investigation, Citic Pacific Special Steel Group is proactively managing risk and fulfilling its duty of care. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, undocumented disciplinary action without a proper investigation fails to establish the facts and may lead to unfair consequences for employees. This bypasses due process and could violate labor laws or internal grievance procedures, creating legal and ethical liabilities. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the findings due to potential disruption, represents a severe dereliction of duty. This passive stance exposes Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and potential harm to stakeholders or the environment, as it signals a disregard for compliance and risk management. A third incorrect approach, which is to only address the issue superficially without a root cause analysis, is insufficient. This might lead to a temporary fix but does not prevent recurrence, indicating a lack of commitment to continuous improvement and robust compliance, which is often a requirement for ongoing operational permits and industry standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes fact-finding, adherence to established procedures, and consultation with relevant internal departments, e.g., legal, compliance, HR, and potentially external experts. This framework involves 1. Acknowledging the alert from the monitoring system. 2. Initiating a formal, documented investigation to gather evidence and understand the scope of the issue. 3. Assessing findings against relevant regulations and internal policies. 4. Developing and implementing corrective actions based on the investigation's outcome. 5. Documenting all steps taken and outcomes. 6. Reviewing and updating internal controls to prevent future occurrences. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a position at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, when asked about their experience with a particular software crucial for steel production planning, initially provided an answer that was technically accurate but omitted a period where they encountered significant difficulties and required extensive support to become proficient. The candidate now has an opportunity to clarify their response. Which approach best demonstrates professional integrity and suitability for the role? Option A. State that the initial answer was correct and that further elaboration is unnecessary, implying that the question was adequately answered. Option B. Reiterate the initial answer, focusing only on the current level of proficiency without mentioning the past challenges, assuming the initial answer was technically correct and sufficient. Option C. Provide a detailed explanation of the initial difficulties encountered with the software, the steps taken to overcome them, the support received, and the subsequent proficiency gained, emphasizing the learning experience and resilience. Option D. Offer a vague acknowledgement of minor learning curves without providing specific details, hoping to satisfy the inquiry without dwelling on past struggles. The correct answer is C. Provide a detailed explanation of the initial difficulties encountered with the software, the steps taken to overcome them, the support received, and the subsequent proficiency gained, emphasizing the learning experience and resilience. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a candidate applying to Citic Pacific Special Steel Group due to the inherent conflict between the desire to present oneself favorably and the imperative to adhere to ethical and regulatory standards in recruitment. The assessment process, by its nature, seeks to evaluate a candidate's suitability, and misrepresenting information, even if seemingly minor, can have significant repercussions. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and professionally. The correct approach involves a candid and transparent acknowledgement of the situation, coupled with a clear explanation of the steps taken to rectify it and the lessons learned. This demonstrates integrity, accountability, and a commitment to ethical conduct, which are paramount in any professional role, especially within a large industrial group like Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. Adherence to the principles of honesty and full disclosure, as implicitly expected in hiring assessments and generally in business dealings, is crucial. While specific regulations for hiring assessments in this context are not explicitly provided, the overarching ethical framework of professional conduct and the implied trust in the assessment process necessitate truthfulness. An incorrect approach would be to omit the information entirely. This constitutes a failure of disclosure and can be interpreted as an attempt to mislead the assessment panel. If discovered, it would severely damage the candidate's credibility and likely lead to disqualification, as it suggests a lack of honesty and a willingness to conceal relevant facts. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay the significance of the error or to offer a superficial excuse without demonstrating genuine understanding or remorse. This approach fails to show accountability and may be perceived as an attempt to evade responsibility. It does not inspire confidence in the candidate's ability to handle challenges with maturity and integrity. A further incorrect approach would be to fabricate a justification for the error or to blame external factors without taking ownership. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a tendency to avoid responsibility, which are highly undesirable traits in any professional setting. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Recognizing the ethical imperative of honesty and transparency. 2. Assessing the potential impact of the omission or misrepresentation. 3. Preparing a clear, concise, and truthful explanation, focusing on the facts and lessons learned. 4. Demonstrating accountability and a commitment to ethical conduct. 5. Understanding that integrity is a foundational element of professional credibility. Question 15. Market research demonstrates that Citic Pacific Special Steel Group is exploring opportunities to enhance its production efficiency. Which of the following approaches to process optimization best aligns with the company's commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical operations? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive review of current processes, identifying bottlenecks through data analysis, consulting with internal and external experts, and piloting changes with rigorous monitoring for compliance and safety. Option B. Adopting the latest, unproven technological advancements that promise significant output increases, assuming they will eventually meet regulatory standards. Option C. Implementing new machinery and workflows based on competitor analysis and projected cost savings, with minimal disruption to current operations. Option D. Prioritizing rapid implementation of cost-cutting measures across all production lines, with a focus on immediate financial returns. The correct answer is C. Implementing new machinery and workflows based on competitor analysis and projected cost savings, with minimal disruption to current operations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, like any major industrial entity, operates within a complex web of regulatory requirements and ethical considerations. Process optimization, while aimed at efficiency and profitability, must be implemented in a manner that upholds these standards. The core challenge lies in balancing the drive for improvement with the imperative to comply with all applicable laws and ethical guidelines, particularly those related to environmental protection, worker safety, and fair business practices. A failure to do so can result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of stakeholder trust. The correct approach involves a thorough and systematic review of existing processes, identifying areas for improvement through data analysis and expert consultation, and then implementing changes in a phased, controlled manner with continuous monitoring and evaluation. This approach is ethically and regulatorily sound because it prioritizes informed decision-making, risk mitigation, and adherence to established frameworks. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of responsible corporate governance, which mandate that companies operate legally and ethically. This includes ensuring that any process changes do not violate environmental regulations, compromise worker safety standards, or engage in anti-competitive practices. The emphasis on data-driven decisions and controlled implementation minimizes the risk of unintended negative consequences that could lead to regulatory breaches. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory compliance would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the adoption of methods that bypass environmental controls, potentially resulting in pollution and violations of environmental protection laws. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment and worker safety training could lead to accidents and breaches of occupational health and safety regulations. Another incorrect approach might involve adopting unproven technologies or methodologies without adequate due diligence, which could inadvertently lead to noncompliance with industry standards or specific legal requirements, even if not explicitly intended. These failures stem from a disregard for the legal and ethical obligations inherent in operating a large industrial enterprise. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape and ethical principles. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of potential process changes, including a detailed analysis of their impact on compliance, safety, and environmental factors. Pilot testing and phased implementation, coupled with robust monitoring and feedback mechanisms, are crucial for ensuring that optimizations are both effective and compliant. When faced with conflicting priorities, the framework should mandate that regulatory and ethical compliance always takes precedence over short-term gains. Question 16. The risk matrix shows a potential for increased emissions from a new production line at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. Which approach to assessing the impact of this new line is most aligned with regulatory compliance and ethical corporate responsibility? Option A. Focus primarily on the projected cost savings and increased production output of the new line, assuming existing environmental controls are sufficient, and any minor emission increases will be within acceptable, albeit broad, regulatory limits. Option B. Prioritize the immediate implementation of the new production line to capitalize on market demand, deferring any detailed environmental or social impact studies until after operations have commenced and any issues arise. Option C. Rely on historical emissions data from older, less efficient production lines at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to estimate the impact of the new line, assuming similar performance characteristics. Option D. Conduct a detailed environmental impact assessment, including projected emissions, potential local air quality effects, and proposed mitigation strategies, while also evaluating the social impact on the surrounding community and the financial implications of compliance measures. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed environmental impact assessment, including projected emissions, potential local air quality effects, and proposed mitigation strategies, while also evaluating the social impact on the surrounding community and the financial implications of compliance measures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, as a publicly listed entity, operates under stringent regulatory oversight. The pressure to meet investor expectations and maintain share price can create a conflict between short-term financial performance and long-term sustainable practices. A robust impact assessment is crucial to identify potential negative consequences of business decisions on various stakeholders and the environment, ensuring compliance with relevant laws and ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial objectives with these broader responsibilities. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and forward-looking impact assessment that considers all potential ramifications of the proposed operational changes. This includes evaluating environmental, social, and governance-esque factors, as well as financial and operational impacts. By proactively identifying and mitigating risks, Citic Pacific Special Steel Group can demonstrate its commitment to responsible corporate citizenship, adhere to regulatory requirements, such as those pertaining to environmental protection and corporate disclosure, and build long-term stakeholder trust. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and sustainable business practices expected of major corporations, an approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without a thorough assessment of environmental consequences would be ethically and regulatorily unsound. It risks violating environmental protection laws, leading to fines, reputational damage, and potential operational disruptions due to noncompliance. Similarly, an approach that focuses solely on financial projections, ignoring the potential impact on employee welfare or community relations, could lead to labor disputes, social unrest, and damage to the company's social license to operate, potentially contravening labor laws and corporate social responsibility guidelines. An approach that relies on outdated or incomplete data for the assessment would fail to identify emerging risks, leading to unforeseen negative impacts and potential regulatory breaches. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the problem and the objectives. This involves defining the scope of the impact assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, gathering comprehensive data, and analyzing potential impacts across various dimensions: environmental, social, economic, operational. The process should include a risk mitigation strategy and a plan for ongoing monitoring and review. When faced with conflicting priorities, professionals must refer to the company's code of conduct, relevant regulations, and ethical frameworks to guide their decisions, ensuring that all actions are defensible and aligned with the company's long-term sustainability and legal obligations. Question 17. The control framework reveals that Citic Pacific Special Steel Group is considering a complex transaction involving the sale of a subsidiary. To ensure accurate financial reporting in accordance with the relevant accounting standards, which approach should the finance team prioritize? Option A. Adopt an accounting treatment that maximizes immediate tax benefits, assuming this will align with financial reporting requirements. Option B. Conduct a detailed review of the applicable accounting standards and consult with accounting experts to determine the most appropriate accounting treatment and disclosures. Option C. Implement an accounting treatment based on industry best practices observed in other jurisdictions, without verifying local regulatory compliance. Option D. Prioritize the speed of reporting by using a simplified accounting method that has been informally discussed with colleagues. The correct answer is A. Adopt an accounting treatment that maximizes immediate tax benefits, assuming this will align with financial reporting requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, as a publicly listed entity, operates under stringent regulatory oversight. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate financial reporting with the imperative to comply with all applicable accounting standards and disclosure requirements. Misinterpreting or misapplying these standards can lead to material misstatements in financial reports, potentially impacting investor confidence, regulatory sanctions, and the company's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen approach aligns with the spirit and letter of the regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific accounting standards applicable to the transaction and consultation with internal or external accounting experts. This ensures that the accounting treatment is not only technically correct according to the relevant framework, but also reflects the economic substance of the transaction. Regulatory justification stems from the fundamental principles of financial reporting, which mandate that financial statements present a true and fair view. Adherence to accounting standards, such as those promulgated by the relevant accounting body in the jurisdiction of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, is a legal and ethical obligation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing immediate tax liabilities without considering the accounting implications would fail to comply with accounting standards. This could lead to an overstatement of assets or understatement of liabilities, resulting in misleading financial statements. Such an approach would violate the principle of accrual accounting and the requirement for financial statements to reflect economic reality. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of reporting over accuracy would risk overlooking critical accounting nuances or disclosure requirements. This could result in incomplete or inaccurate financial information being disseminated, which is a direct contravention of regulatory expectations for timely and reliable financial reporting. A third incorrect approach that relies on informal or anecdotal interpretations of accounting rules without proper research or expert consultation is highly susceptible to error. This can lead to non-compliance with established accounting principles and potentially result in significant restatements of financial results, attracting regulatory scrutiny. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the transaction's nature, identification of all relevant accounting standards and regulations, consultation with subject matter experts when necessary, and a clear documentation of the rationale behind the chosen accounting treatment. Professionals must prioritize compliance and accuracy, understanding that short-term gains from non-compliance are far outweighed by the long-term risks and consequences. Question 18. Operational review demonstrates that Citic Pacific Special Steel Group is facing increased pressure to meet ambitious production targets. Simultaneously, there are emerging concerns regarding the company's waste disposal practices and air emission levels. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical corporate responsibility for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group? Option A. Address environmental concerns only when formal notices of violation are received from regulatory authorities, focusing resources on immediate remediation rather than preventative measures. Option B. Prioritize meeting production targets by temporarily deferring non-critical environmental upgrades while planning for future compliance. Option C. Implement a comprehensive environmental management system that integrates pollution control measures and waste management protocols, ensuring strict adherence to all applicable national and local environmental protection laws and standards, and conduct regular internal audits to verify compliance. Option D. Engage in public relations efforts to highlight existing environmental initiatives without significantly altering current operational practices that contribute to emissions and waste. The correct answer is B. Prioritize meeting production targets by temporarily deferring non-critical environmental upgrades while planning for future compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group due to the inherent conflict between achieving operational efficiency and adhering to stringent environmental regulations. The pressure to meet production targets can inadvertently lead to shortcuts or a disregard for compliance procedures, potentially resulting in environmental damage and significant legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that operational goals do not compromise environmental stewardship. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy that embeds environmental compliance into the core operational framework. This means establishing robust internal controls, conducting regular environmental impact assessments, and fostering a culture of compliance throughout the organization. Specifically, Citic Pacific Special Steel Group should prioritize the implementation of advanced pollution control technologies and ensure that all waste management practices strictly adhere to the latest national and local environmental protection laws and standards. This approach is ethically sound and legally defensible, as it demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship and minimizes the risk of regulatory penalties and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on production output without adequate consideration for environmental impact. This could manifest as delaying the upgrade of outdated pollution control equipment or overlooking minor environmental breaches in the name of expediency. Such an approach is ethically flawed because it prioritizes short-term financial gains over the long-term health of the environment and the community. It also carries significant regulatory risk, as environmental agencies are empowered to impose substantial fines and operational restrictions for noncompliance. Another incorrect approach is to adopt a reactive stance, addressing environmental issues only when prompted by regulatory bodies or public outcry. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to proactively manage environmental risks. Ethically, it suggests a disregard for environmental responsibility until forced to comply. Legally, it can lead to more severe penalties, as regulators may view a reactive approach as evidence of systemic noncompliance or negligence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a comprehensive risk assessment that explicitly includes environmental compliance. This requires understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to Citic Pacific Special Steel Group's operations, identifying potential environmental hazards, and developing mitigation strategies. Furthermore, fostering open communication channels between operational and environmental compliance teams is crucial to ensure that environmental considerations are integrated into all operational planning and decision-making processes. A commitment to continuous improvement in environmental performance, driven by both regulatory requirements and ethical considerations, should guide all actions. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential concern regarding the sourcing practices of a key supplier to Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, suggesting that their raw materials might be linked to regions with documented human rights issues. Citic Pacific Special Steel Group is under pressure to maintain competitive pricing for its steel products. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation in line with responsible corporate conduct? Option A. Immediately terminate the contract with the supplier based on the feedback, without conducting any investigation to mitigate potential reputational risks. Option B. Prioritize maintaining the current pricing structure and supply chain stability, and disregard the stakeholder feedback as unsubstantiated unless concrete proof of violation is presented directly to Citic Pacific Special Steel Group. Option C. Accept the supplier's assurance that their sourcing practices are compliant without further investigation, citing the need to maintain competitive pricing and avoid disrupting the supply chain. Option D. Conduct a thorough due diligence investigation into the supplier's sourcing practices, including requesting documentation and potentially engaging in on-site verification, to ascertain the validity of the feedback and the supplier's compliance with ethical sourcing standards. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough due diligence investigation into the supplier's sourcing practices, including requesting documentation and potentially engaging in on-site verification, to ascertain the validity of the feedback and the supplier's compliance with ethical sourcing standards. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Citic Pacific Special Steel Group due to the inherent tension between maintaining competitive pricing and adhering to ethical sourcing and supply chain transparency principles. The company must navigate the complexities of global supply chains, where the origin of raw materials can be opaque, and ensure that its procurement practices align with both internal ethical guidelines and any applicable regulatory frameworks governing responsible sourcing. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial pressures with the imperative to act with integrity and avoid complicity in unethical practices. The correct approach involves a proactive and diligent investigation into the supplier's practices. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical sourcing and supply chain due diligence, which is increasingly expected by stakeholders and may be mandated by emerging regulations or industry best practices. By seeking direct evidence and engaging with the supplier to understand their sourcing, Citic Pacific Special Steel Group upholds its responsibility to ensure its operations do not contribute to human rights abuses or environmental degradation. This aligns with principles of corporate social responsibility and risk management, safeguarding the company's reputation and long-term sustainability. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the supplier's assurance without independent verification fails to meet the standard of due diligence. This approach risks overlooking potential ethical breaches and could expose Citic Pacific Special Steel Group to reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny if the supplier's claims are found to be false. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately sever ties without investigation, might be overly punitive and could disrupt legitimate supply chains unnecessarily. While decisive action is sometimes required, a measured approach that seeks to understand and rectify issues first is often more professionally sound, unless immediate and severe violations are evident. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore the feedback due to cost pressures, represents a clear ethical failure and a disregard for responsible business conduct, potentially leading to severe legal and reputational consequences. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations alongside commercial objectives. This involves establishing clear policies for supplier due diligence, actively seeking and verifying information, engaging with suppliers to address concerns, and having robust escalation procedures for identified risks. When faced with stakeholder feedback, the initial step should always be a thorough and objective investigation, followed by a reasoned decision based on the evidence gathered and applicable ethical and regulatory standards. Question 20. Upon reviewing preliminary production figures for a new high-strength alloy being developed by Citic Pacific Special Steel Group, an employee is asked by a trusted long-term supplier for an indication of the expected volume of raw material orders for the next quarter. The employee believes this information would be helpful for the supplier's planning. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee? Option A. Share the preliminary production figures directly with the supplier, as they are a trusted partner and the information is for planning purposes. Option B. Decline to provide any information and state that production volumes are not discussed with suppliers. Option C. Inform the supplier that the preliminary figures are confidential and that any information sharing must follow established company protocols for disclosing sensitive production data. Option D. Provide the supplier with an estimated volume based on the preliminary figures, explaining that these are early estimates. The correct answer is D. Provide the supplier with an estimated volume based on the preliminary figures, explaining that these are early estimates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Citic Pacific Special Steel Group regarding the handling of potentially sensitive information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to share information for legitimate business purposes with the obligation to protect confidential data and comply with internal policies and relevant regulations. Careful judgment is required to discern what information can be shared, with whom, and under what circumstances, without jeopardizing the company's competitive position or violating any legal or ethical standards. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of Citic Pacific Special Steel Group's internal policies on information sharing and confidentiality, coupled with an awareness of any applicable industry-specific regulations or general data protection principles that might govern the disclosure of such information. This approach prioritizes adherence to established protocols and seeks appropriate authorization before disseminating sensitive data. This is the best professional practice because it demonstrates a commitment to corporate governance, risk management, and ethical conduct. By following internal procedures and seeking guidance, the employee ensures that information is shared responsibly, minimizing the risk of breaches, unauthorized disclosure, or regulatory noncompliance. This proactive stance protects both the individual and the company. An incorrect approach would be to share the information without proper authorization, even if the recipient is a known business partner. This fails to respect the internal controls designed to safeguard confidential information and could lead to breaches of contract, competitive disadvantage, or even regulatory penalties if the information falls under specific legal protections. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because the information is related to a business discussion, it is automatically permissible to share. This overlooks the nuances of confidentiality and the specific requirements of internal policies, which may dictate that certain types of information require explicit consent or are entirely non-disclosable. A third incorrect approach would be to delay sharing the information indefinitely due to fear of repercussions, even when it is necessary for a legitimate business purpose and can be shared appropriately. This hinders business operations and can be detrimental to the company's interests. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the information and its potential sensitivity. They should then consult relevant internal policies and guidelines, such as those pertaining to data security, confidentiality, and information sharing. If there is any ambiguity or if the information is particularly sensitive, seeking clarification and approval from a supervisor or the relevant department, e.g., legal. Compliance is crucial. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and ethically sound, prioritizing the protection of company assets and reputation.